Hey friends, got a great interview with Scott Ryan, the creator of Mr. Inbetween, coming up for you in just a second. But before we get to that, you can support the show that comes at you for free each and every week by heading to comingupnext.com.au. You'll find the whole back catalogue of podcast rambles there. That's 166 if you're listening to this in sequential order. You'll also find links to subscribe to the show on iTunes, on Stitcher, or on Podbean. If you subscribe to the show, I'll keep bringing you conversations with some of the world's top creatives each and every week. Let's get into it. What's up, friends? Welcome to another episode of Coming Up Next. I'm Alistair Marks. This is my show. This is Coming Up Next, the podcast. Big thank you to my guest last week. Thanks to Matt Turnauer, who is the director of a lot of verite documentaries, including most recently a documentary on Studio 54 and Scotty and the Secret History of Hollywood. If you've not yet checked it out, you can do it at comingupnext.com.au. Scott Ryan is an actor, writer, and director that you may or may not be familiar with. He wrote a film in 2005 called The Magician, which he also directed and acted in. And fast forward 13 years, and the film has been turned into a TV series called Mr. Inbetween. It premiered on FX in the States on the 25th of September, and just last week premiered in Australia on Showcase. If you're interested in checking it out, you can find it on Showcase or on demand if you're in Australia. And if you're not in Australia, might have to Google to find out which on-demand platform you can find it available on. Anyway, I was keen to speak with Scott about the process of turning something from feature into series over such a long period of time. So we get into that. We get into all the usual stuff. So let's get into it right now. Coming up next with Scott Ryan. Was it 2005 or 2006? I remember going to the Melbourne Film Festival and seeing The Magician, and now we've flashed forward 12 or so years, and you've turned it into a series with FX and with Blue Tongue Films, Mr. Inbetween. But I guess it would be great to hear, even before getting into the progress from The Magician to Mr. Inbetween, what your kind of background was and how you came into filmmaking from the beginning.
I guess I started writing scripts when I was about probably 9 years old, I suppose. I remember one of my teachers at school, we had to do a composition for school in the class, and everybody in the class wrote a story, and she handed all the stories back, but she didn't hand mine back, and she said, "Look, can you come up and read your story out in front of the class? I think it's really good." And, I didn't like public speaking. I was very shy, so I wasn't too happy about that. But I got up and I read it out, and, before too long, everybody was laughing their heads off. It was a comedy. And
do you remember what it was about?
It was about going on an adventure or something. It was about... I remember I used actually kids in my class as characters in the story, and there was something about we're on an island or something, and there was a boat and somebody fell overboard and somebody picked their nose and went to wipe the booger on the ignition switch of the boat, and somebody swimming in the water got all chopped up, and so it was pretty dark. And but everybody seemed to love it, they really dug it. And I thought, geez, hold on, that's pretty good, that, It's I like the attention, it's good, bit of positive attention. So, so I started writing scripts, started writing plays, because we had like a little stage in one of the other rooms. and everybody had put on, different kids would do little skits once a week on a Friday. So I thought, well, I'll have a crack at that. So I started writing my own scripts and acting in those. But yeah, I got a bit of stage fright. I didn't like sort of performing. Kind of freaked me out a little bit. So I did that, and then sort of wrote here and there, and then I guess I started writing screenplays when I was about, I think about 20 years old, I suppose, and did that for, I guess, about 10 years, until I finally wrote a half decent one, which was The Magician.
Did you have any sort of I guess formal training? Were you learning while you were at school how to kind of start crafting scripts, or was it more something that you were learning as you were doing it?
Yeah, I think that's actually the best way to do it, is just learn as you do it. I tried reading those screenwriting books where they try to, tell you how to write to a formula, um, but I didn't find that very helpful. They were written by guys who basically couldn't write. So, if somebody's writing a book to teach you how to write and they can't write, well, you've got a problem, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if you're going to write a book on it, you should know what you're talking about. So, have you done it? And the answer to that question is no. So, what the hell are you trying to tell me how to do it for? And I think that's a problem with a lot of writing these days. I think that people go and do a writing course, or they read a book, and they think, oh, I'm a writer now. I know what I'm doing now. And, there's all these formulas that people try to get you to stick to. I think that's why things are the way they are these days. I mean, I think scripts now are much worse than they were before you had screenwriting teachers.
That's an interesting thought. Have you ever felt like, I guess, a sense of frustration in this process of trying to get Mr. Inbetween, or the various incarnations of that happening, about the kind of state of some of the things that do end up getting up?
Yeah, it's hard when you see stuff get made that's just absolute rubbish, and and then of course, you think that what you do is good quality, whether it is or not. But yeah, it's hard, it's frustrating, you kind of, and I just stopped going to see movies. Basically, I didn't, I stopped watching TV and stopped going to the movies.
Yeah, yeah, it's difficult, I guess, and it feels like in smaller markets like maybe Australia or other parts of Europe, or these places that don't have studio system, I guess, funding models. There's the things like development and proper script development kind of just get thrown by the wayside sometimes.
Yeah, I think so, especially in Australia.
Yeah.
I think there's just not the money to really develop the scripts.
So going back, I guess, to just leading into making The Magician. Do you remember at what point you kind of had the idea, or that kind of inceptive moment where you thought this could actually be something, we could actually make something here that could actually be really good?
Yeah, I kind of felt, I was sort of thinking about, because I knew that whatever I was going to do, it had to be cheap. So I had the Hitman idea, and I thought, well, how do I do that with no money so it doesn't look ridiculous? And then I thought, well, the fake doco, is the way to go. So once I had that idea, I sat down and started writing.
Yeah. And was there a part of you that was, I guess, apprehensive about stepping into that world, or were you just like, nah, this is, and I don't mean necessarily just the Hitman world, I mean also the world of making fake documentary stuff, or was it just something that felt like this is a good fit for what thematically the story I want to tell is?
Yeah, it was one of those things that I just had no money, so it was a matter of having to do it that way. Wasn't so much a choice. I guess I would have preferred to do it not as a mockumentary, to do it more as, Mr. Inbetween sort of style. But, when you got no money and you got no resources, you kind of, you're between a rock and a hard place. So Yeah, I just thought I'd give it a crack, and I guess I had a lot of self belief, I suppose,
Yeah.
um, that I could pull it off while everybody was telling me that I couldn't.
How did you kind of, I guess, how did you reconcile the naysayers, so to speak, or was it just a matter of just believing that they were wrong and you were right?
Yeah, I just believed that I was right, basically. I'm a bit sort of pig-headed in certain ways, I suppose, and it's funny because I don't really believe in myself in a lot of other areas, but, in this area, I just felt that I could pull it off. I thought, as an actor, I could pull it off, which was weird because I had no training. I'd never done anything. So I don't know where I got that idea from. And I'd never really done anything as a writer.
Was it? Do you feel like it was because you had this character in your head, you knew him kind of inside out?
Yeah, I felt that I knew him, but I also felt I just felt that as an actor I could pull it off. And I don't know why. I don't know whether it was from watching other actors or I really don't know why. I thought that and why I had that self belief that I could do it, and do it, really well.
Yeah. So, at what point in the process did Nash Edgerton come on board, the magician?
Well, I'd made the feature and basically wasn't getting anywhere with it, so I decided to cut it down to a half hour short and stick it in the St Kilda Film Festival. And that was kind of like my last gasp effort. I thought, well, if this doesn't do anything, well, that's pretty much it for me. So I put it in the festival, got in, and went to the screening. And as I came out, Nash was standing outside, and he came up to me and he goes, "Hey, man, I saw your film. I loved it." And that's where our association started. He said, "Look, I want to try to get it out there in the world." And I said, "Well, look, you might as well come on board as a producer, and that way, get a credit on it and maybe get something out of it. Might help you." And he said, "Sure, but I think we should re-edit it." And I said, "Yeah, sure," because I wasn't an editor, and I'd edited the whole thing on a home computer. So it's one of those things. I originally just wanted to be a writer. That's all I wanted to do. But I couldn't get anywhere as a writer, so I figured, well, I'm going to have to become a writer, director, actor, producer,
And editor.
and make the film and editor and do the catering. So I basically had to take on all these other roles, and learn how to do those as well, to get it made, to get it out there. So I went up to Sydney and we edited the film up there with a girl called Chris Rowe, as she was editing, and Nash and myself, and did that up in the Blue Tongue offices up in Sydney, and I was up there for a little while, and then Nash got Michelle Bennett on board, showed her what we had, and she came on board as a producer, I think an executive producer, and yeah, then we got a distribution deal with Hopscotch, and we got money to finish it properly, do proper sound and all that kind of stuff, and transfer it to 35 mil and for theatrical, and yeah.
It's a pretty remarkable turnaround, I suppose, and I guess it just goes to kind of reinforce what you were saying about having that self belief, and you've got the vision. Um, while you were shooting the film, was there a kind of sense that, yeah, I've made the right choice? Because you self financed it as well, didn't you?
Yeah. I used my own money that I'd saved up to make the film.
Yeah, so it was really kind of an all-in sort of move, I guess, on your behalf as a creative to back yourself.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Were there any moments while you were shooting it where you felt like, what the fuck are we doing? Or like, shit, any like kind of big challenges that presented themselves beyond kind of like, I guess the logistical challenges of putting together a feature?
I mean, as we were making it, I kind of felt like, oh my God, this is not really that great. It's not really going to be that good. I kind of felt that, and it wasn't until I actually sat down to edit, and looked at what I had, that then I started to realize, yeah, hold on, I've actually got something here. This actually could work. And really, the editing process was actually the thing that I enjoyed most, just sitting there and watching and picking the best takes and putting it together. And then I realised, that I didn't have enough material. So about a year later, I think, or not quite a year later, went and shot some extra footage, an extra character, and threw that in there. And then, then I felt like, I actually had something that maybe I could possibly, get into cinemas, which was a ridiculous idea when you consider the fact that it's, I mean, how many student films do you know that end up with a theatrical release? It's just, but just, and it was a crewless feature film, no professional actors. I mean, I was just completely bonkers, really, when I
Yeah.
look back on it.
Well, if anything, the crew was actually the cast as well.
Yeah, there was no actual, as far as I know, it's the only crewless feature film ever made because the actors were actually the crew. So,
Yeah.
and no wonder people were saying to me, you're an idiot, you're pulling yourself. There's no way you're going to pull this off and all that kind of stuff. But for some reason, I just knew I could do it.
And after you have the endorsement from someone like Nash, and you're up in Sydney working in Blue Tongue, and even I guess to the point where you've got this theatrical release with Hopscotch. I think at that moment it must feel like, yes, I'm really glad that I backed myself, that I made this, that I actually put myself out there. And then when did you and Nash start to flesh it out and think maybe there's something bigger here than just this feature? Maybe there's actually a show or a series or something that can come out of this character.
I actually had a lot of material just sitting around, like ideas that I wanted to do in The Magician, but without the money and the resources, I just couldn't do. So I thought, why don't I start writing these ideas down? And then I thought, should I do it as another feature? And then for some reason, I'm not sure why, I sort of thought this might be better as a TV show. So, yeah, I started writing things down, and then a producer from Sydney contacted me and said, what do you think about doing a TV show? And I said, well, funny you should say that because I've already kind of had that idea. And then we got Nash and Michelle on board, and then we started developing it with SBS. And we developed it there for, I think, about 2 years. And we got reasonably close, but the person who championed the show ended up leaving SBS, and then reasonably soon after that they got cold feet and backed out. So
It must have been a frustrating and tedious process, I guess, feeling like you were getting so close to getting or moving into pre-production or production, because I could imagine over what probably would have been about 10 years that that it probably would have got close to getting up quite a few times before actually not happening.
yeah, we had the SBS thing that didn't pan out, and then we went and pitched it to HBO in the States. Again, Nash organised that. Nash sort of got that going, and we had some issues.
Was that a surreal kind of process?
Oh yeah, to be on HBO,
Yeah.
it's like, geez, these are the guys that did The Sopranos, and so that was pretty amazing. And but that didn't really work out. We weren't going to have the creative control that we needed to make it the way we wanted to make it. They would have. I don't think that they would have cast me to star in it. I think that was an issue for Nash and I. I mean, more so him than me. I mean, I said to him, look, if they want to put somebody else in it, let's just do that. At least we get it made. And he was kind of like, I don't know about that. So, then we brought it we had it in Australia again, and we sort of shopped it around in Australia. And we gave the scripts to somebody here, and one of the what would you call it? Pay TV channels, I suppose you'd call it. And they didn't, the same thing again. They didn't want me to be in it, I asked them if they'd seen The Magician. They said yes. And I said, well, what did you think of my performance? They said, yeah, it was great. And I said, well, why don't you want to, why don't you want me to be in the TV show? And they're like, oh, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so, yeah, that kind of fell over. They got cold feet. And then about a year later, I was watching their channel and they'd basically made the show. And, changed it. But it was basically about a enforcer, debt collector, blah, blah, slash, whatever. And
That must have been a kick in the teeth.
yeah, it was actually. I wasn't very happy about that. But the great thing about it now is, reading reviews, critical reviews of the show, and even people who don't like the show, people are very happy with what I did as an actor. So that kind of makes me feel pretty good, and it must make these people feel like absolute idiots. They're probably kicking themselves now, thinking that they should have just cast me.
Yeah. Well, I think, like you said, the proof was in the pudding with The Magician to begin with. So I guess it's kind of their archaic views on the process of putting projects, films, or television shows together. It's just that kind of outdated model of needing to cast well-known soap actors that just doesn't work.
Yeah. It's interesting to show that the people who ripped off my show, they ended up, it lasted one season and it was just absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, right.
Which made me feel pretty good.
Yeah.
So I think maybe if I can get a copy of Mr. Inbetween on DVD, maybe I'll send them a copy and say this is what it should have fucking looked like.
Yeah. What was it like then, I guess, when you finally did get the right partners involved, you got the funding for it, and you actually stepped on set, put the character back on, and were on your first day of production? That must have been very exciting.
No, it was actually very stressful because I'd never worked on a film set before, like a professional set with a crew and professional actors. I'd never done that before, so it was actually pretty traumatic.
Right. So what were you doing, I guess, in between The Magician and Mr. Inbetween to kind of to satiate your creative bones, I guess?
I was sort of involved in a few things that didn't sort of take off. I got a part in an American film, was cast in that, and that sort of fell over. And, so there was a few things I was doing and I was still writing, and then eventually I just gave up and stopped writing. So when Nash called me and said FX want to do the show, I was driving taxis.
Were you, I mean, you're probably getting a lot of creative inspiration from driving taxis. I could imagine you get a lot of interesting stories and people coming through doing something like that. But had you just basically resigned yourself to not writing ever again, or was it just something that you were doing while something else might be happening in the background?
Yeah, well, Nash had sort of said that he was, I knew that Nash was still trying to get the show made, but yeah, I kind of just settled into the 9 to 5 life. And when you're working, like I was doing a lot of night shifts and long hours driving taxis, last thing you feel like doing when you come home is writing a script. So it wasn't a conscious decision to stop writing. It just didn't feel like doing it anymore, basically.
Yeah, I can understand that. There's something, I suppose, when the creative industries are so fickle and without any sort of real stability that that when you do find something that has that level of security or stability, you just kind of it can feel quite comfortable, I think.
Yeah, it does.
But then I guess, moving however many years later, when Nash did call you and the show was ready to go, what was the process like from that first really stressful day to premiering last week in Australia?
Yeah, well, it was actually we finished the show quite a while ago. Like we finished it pretty much last year, so it was kind of a lot of sitting around waiting for it to happen, really. So it's just good to finally have it out there in the world,
Yeah, I could imagine that there must be a great relief to actually having this project out in the world. given the longevity of the process and building the magician and then building Mr. Inbetween and the kind of challenges that you've faced, what would make Mr. Inbetween a success in your eyes versus what would have made the magician a success when you made that back in 2005?
I guess the fact that the magician was released theatrically, that was a success. Certainly a foot in the door, and the fact that the show got picked up by FX in the US. We figured they'd probably remake the show if we were lucky, but there was a small chance, but we hoped, that was the dream, I guess, that we'd get picked up by FX or somebody in the States, and we get it over there, and now we've done that, and we're also screening internationally in other countries in Europe and stuff as well. So yeah, I don't think and the show premiered in the US before it premiered in Australia, which as far as I know has never happened before with a show that's been made in Australia before. So
yeah, it's a real there's a real sense of kind of triumph, I think.
Yeah, considering what we had to go to, with all the years and all the struggle, you know what I mean, and the struggle to be able to do it the way we wanted to do it, in regards to the writing and everything else, and me actually being in it, and it's good. We feel vindicated. Nash feels vindicated that he held out for so long, and so do I.
And I think even if you go back as far as the shooting of The Magician, to kind of bring something to life in the way that you did, and to then kind of, I guess, move beyond just the conceptually the feature film to actually having something that's playing on a world stage now. It's a huge triumph, and I think there'll be a lot of younger creatives out there who'll look to that as a really great example of what can happen if you back yourself and you actually put yourself out there.
Yeah, well, hopefully. I mean, the great thing is these days, looking at The Magician, for example, the camera on my phone shoots video at about 8 times the quality of what the camera I shot The Magician was. So, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't and can't make a feature film or a short film with your phone.
Yeah.
Absolutely no reason.
Yeah.
You don't need money. All you need is, good idea, good characters, whatever it is. If you've got the creative, skills, I suppose, or the creative talent, or whatever you want to call it, then it's really not important what technology that you have. I think people get caught up in that a lot, about how a film should look, and that becomes super important. To me, it's more it's more the content that's important. It's things like the writing, for example. And writing really costs you very little. Writing is something you can do for free, for nothing, and it's something I did for nothing for many years. And if you really put the time and effort into writing, I think it's probably the most important part of making anything, whether it's a short or a feature film or a TV show. It's, if the writing isn't, if it's not there on the page, you're really going to struggle, I think.
Yeah. So I think story and character and relationships, those are the real blueprints of a good film. Thank you so much, Scott, for jumping on the call with me and having a little Monday ramble. I end all of my conversations with the same question. This question is, what makes you silly?
I think probably being a creative sort of person. I think that's what makes me silly. I think if I had a choice between being creative and just not creative, I'd choose not being creative.
So you'd give up all the creativity in exchange for being a little bit more on the straight and narrow. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'd much prefer to be the kind of person who just could, do a 9 to 5 job and be happy with that. I'd take that over being creative. I
Yeah.
mean, if it pays off for you, I think being creative is great. But if it doesn't, and there's a lot of people for who it doesn't pay off, then it can be a bit of a curse, I think.
Yeah, it can be a very difficult line of work, if you want to call it a line of work, to get into, for sure. Thank you so much, Scott.
All right, mate.